Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 94th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 425th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, September 20th, 2018. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes a shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Tuesday when Andy Katz released the latest edition of his March Madness 365 podcast, which featured a brief interview with Juwan Morgan. And my goodness, did Juwan pack a lot of interesting comments into his short time on the air. The one that generated the most attention was the last one. Katz asked Juwan to complete this sentence: Indiana will make the NCAA tournament if... Juwan replied simply, there is no if, we will. Boom. Now, on the one hand, you could argue that it's a bit silly for a senior who has missed 2 straight NCAA tournaments to express such bravado publicly. Maybe, get comfortably on the north side of 500 for a few weeks before you start guaranteeing NCAA tournament berths. But on the other hand, sometimes the belief has to precede the action for success to be the result. And Juwan's unwavering confidence in this team's ultimate destination may be exactly what this young roster needs to carry it through the inevitable early season ups and downs. And there will be ups and downs. This Indiana team has a lot of questions to answer for Juwan's prediction to ultimately come true. But one question we already know the answer to is the same one that has sunk several Indiana teams over the last few years. Who is the leader? It's Juwan. And clearly, he believes in the team he's leading. Which is good, because 2 straight cold, dark winters extending into March is quite enough. It's time for the sun to shine in spring again. And according to Juwan Morgan, that's exactly what will happen this season. Okay, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Tom Allen of Girls Youth Sports Coaching in Cincinnati. He is the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and he is one of the world's most respected bracketologists. He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your bottoms line on the last week in IU basketball?
Well, I mean, from a basketball perspective, I've been keeping track of the Inside the Hall release of the top 25 Big Ten players. And so Romeo was there at number 6, and Juwan has yet to be named. So unless Alex has some eyes on, the whole fan base turning on him, Juwan will be somewhere in the top 5. And it's pretty exciting to go into a season with, they've tended to do pretty well with these rankings. And so to have 2 of the top 6 guys on the roster heading into the season is really exciting. And maybe that's something that, gives Juwan the confidence to make the statement that you talked about before. But, so that's all these countdowns and everything else is just little appetizers till the season gets here, which, in just a little bit over a week, we'll actually have Hoosier Hysteria to overreact to. So that'll at least be something that we've long awaited. And the other thing we've talked through is our meetup this year, which will be against Michigan State, and another big game in Bloomington against the Spartans will be this weekend as well. So hoping the football team can keep the momentum going as well and get to 4-0. So a lot of excitement in Bloomington with all the athletic programs, as you talked about with Jeremy Gray this week on podcast On the Brink. It was kind of amazing to step back and listen to him talk about all the good things that are happening with so many programs across it. So an exciting time for the Hoosiers, and certainly an exciting time from a basketball standpoint.
Absolutely. And to my right, he's a columnist for The Big Lead and a co-host of The Hangover, but you know him as Indiana radio's most opinionated, polarizing, over-the-top personality.
I pretty much have an opinion on everything.
He is Ryan Phillips. And look, before we get to Ryan's rant, I just want to say that even though he slept through the first 2 segments of last week's show, leaving us wondering where he might be, hoping that he was still alive, he did eventually wake up in time to make it here for Segment 3, and he shook off the cobwebs to deliver some really solid analysis.
I think we should all respect him for that.
I mean, that seems a bit much, but I am willing to bury the hatchet, forgive and forget. Andy, Coach, I assume that you guys agree?
No.
He ought to be fired.
Come on, dude.
You cannot outwork me.
Hey, watch it.
Go to work.
I don't wanna.
Sensitive lungs, Ryan Phillips.
You know what? Leave me alone.
I don't really feel like it.
Oh, my God. This was the most ridiculous ordeal of my life.
Well, the chat room loved it.
Fantastic.
I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Dicks.
Oh, my. Okay, well, that certainly escalated quicker than anyone could have imagined. So Ryan will not be with us this evening, but this week we did line up a suitable replacement just in case, and in fact, you just heard him. He was a 10-year high school head coach at Indiana who is currently an assistant coach at Western High School. He is the host of Sports Talk with Tonsoni and the founder of the Delphi Bracketology Club. He is the coach, Brian Tonsoni, and that means it's Tonsoni time. Coach, what's on your mind?
You know, it just seems there's a good vibe on the Bloomington campus right now. And basketball-wise, it's nice seeing Indiana basketball mentioned in some top 25. Some players getting recognition. And then, you know, being down on campus the last 2 weeks, running into members of the chat mob. Josh Wilson came out to the tailgate. You guys need to know, and I know our chat mob knows how much you guys are appreciated. It's pretty cool to be have people walk by the sign at the tailgate and give a thumbs up. So there's a lot of anticipation. It feels like the old times walking around campus. It helps that your fall sports teams are doing well. Walked by Deron Davis on Kirkwood the other night, and just seeing a player close up gets you excited for Indiana basketball, and we're getting close to where we can actually see what the guys look like. But the vibe is real, and soon we'll get that taken care of by seeing some actual basketball.
All right, well, here's what we are going to talk about this week. We'll hit a few quick headlines, and then we're going to react to the rest of Juwan Morgan's comments, because there were a lot of good ones in there. And we're going to discuss 3 high-leverage team stats that Indiana really needs to improve upon this season. And if they do, will really go a long way toward fulfilling or toward making Juwan's comments with Andy Katz come true. And then, of course, with whatever time we have left, we will answer your questions. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to this week's top story, I do want to remind you about the best way to shop online for great deals on IU basketball and football tickets. Just remember this URL, iutickets.shop. It will take you right to SeatGeek, where you can immediately find the best deals on IU basketball tickets. Plus, you can search for IU football tickets, other sports tickets, concert tickets, and more. As a bonus, use the promo code ASSEMBLY to get $20 back after your first purchase. And when you use that URL, iutickets.shop, we actually get paid a commission for referring you.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty cool. And these commissions add up and have a big impact on helping us cover the costs of running the show. So we appreciate you using that URL. Once again, it is iutickets.shop.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's hit a couple of these headlines here real quick, guys, before we break. One is we found out last night that Archie Miller is going to be an honorary captain for the IU football team on Saturday night when the Hoosiers face Michigan State, which is obviously very cool. And then we found out a little bit of information about Hoosier Hysteria. We know that it's going to begin at 4 o'clock Eastern time, but the doors to Simon Scott Assembly Hall are actually going to open at 2 o'clock. And since the Rutgers IU football game begins at noon, I believe, it will still be going on. So it will be shown on the big screen. Parking lot's open at 12:30. Admission is free, of course. Bring a canned good. Andy, do you think that, moving the start time up, having the football game on, doing some of those things, do you think that that's going to increase attendance for the event, or do you think it would have been better to kind of keep it at night, which is when we usually see it?
I actually think it's great. If my daughter didn't have a soccer game, it would be a case where we could make the trip over for the day and still get home at a reasonable time at night. And I think you'll find a lot of people are able to do that around different parts of Indiana if they don't want to or can't go and stay the entire weekend. I think that becomes a lot more enticing for those kinds of folks and some of that. So I think from a family perspective, I think it helps a lot in that regard. Being able to see, most of the second half of the football game on the big screen inside, kind of helps mitigate anybody who, really wants to watch that. I'm sure people will be, watching in the parking lot or, setting things up there. But I actually kind of like it. It seemed odd to me at first, but the more I thought about it, from that perspective is fine. And I think from an energy perspective, I think it's still going to be the same excitement, the same, everybody's been waiting for, months for this season to start. So getting it a few hours early or at a different time of day to me isn't going to dampen the enthusiasm of whoever's going to be there. So I actually kind of like it, even though at first I thought it was a little odd.
Coach, you're going to be there, right?
I haven't made up my mind yet.
Well, you got to at least be in Bloomington that weekend because I'm going to be down there. So I'd love to see you, or I'm going to be up there, I should say.
I'll make the trip for that.
Well, we know your thoughts on Hoosier Hysteria.
Your podcast with Jeremy opened my eyes a little bit about and remembering it's a time when a lot of people who can't get tickets get to see the Indiana Hoosier basketball program, and moving it up to 4, as Andy also said, the family atmosphere. You make it 7, 8 o'clock at night, and if there's an hour, 2-hour travel, that becomes difficult for families with young children. And I thought it might take away a little bit from the evening, the buildup, the standing in line, the tailgating. But I think really it's appropriate. It actually probably matches up more with what I kind of want, is get in there, get some work done, and call it an afternoon and try to make the best out of it. But it's for the recruits, it's for the high school kids coming in, and it is for the families and the fans that, this is a big deal. Indiana basketball is a big deal, and it's not easy to get tickets. So with that in mind, I think the move, but I think attendance would be great regardless. You could put it at 2 a.m. this year, and I think it would be packed. I think the excitement's that high. So I don't know if it affects attendance. I just think it's probably a good overall move by the athletic department.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right on that. All right, coming up on the assembly call, we're going to dive in a little bit more to Juwan Morgan's comments with Andy Katz, because he said more than just guaranteeing an NCAA tournament appearance. We will talk about that coming up next on the assembly call. Stick with us. All right. Segment 1 in the books. Hello to everyone out there. Hello to the chat mob. Awesome to see so many of you.
Hey, Kent. I got it right here. Keeping Ryan close. You asked in the chat room where the San Diego hat was.
Ben said that you should be part of the spectacle, coach. You should be a guest coach during the scrimmage. I'd be all for that.
Watch in the back room during the 3 hours, and I'll provide for the program that way.
All right, so let me mark this down. Okay, so we have, let's see, 24 minutes, so 11:48. So we got about 11:28 for this segment. And if we wrap this up early, then we'll dive into the other stuff. I was going to save the headlines for the next segment, but then it felt kind of awkward coming out of the SeatGeek ad read, so.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to have at least a little bit of something at the end.
Yeah.
So that was an easy, quick thing to slot in. So
yeah, that's what I figured. That is what I figured. Yeah, and any chat mob folks, if you're going to be there, definitely hit me up. I'm trying to think. Shoot me an email or send me a tweet if you're going to be there, because I would love to see as many of you as possible. And the nice thing about it being early is, we can hang out afterwards. Because Andy, you're still going to be able to host the Hoosier Hysteria show, right?
Yeah, I should be good to do that. She plays earlier in the afternoon. If her game gets rained out, though, I would seriously consider actually packing up the family and coming. So I know that would not really be good for show purposes. So I don't know.
Figure something out. We'd go record something.
Obviously, there's nothing I can do to prepare for that now. But I think my kids, it would be fun. And like I said, we could go and come back in one day. It would be a decent amount of driving, but it's only 2.5 hours from here. It's not terrible.
Nah, if you can go, definitely go, and then we can just.
We'll see, but I doubt that will be the case. But
okay.
But yeah, otherwise, I can plan on doing something. We just got to figure out if Ryan could do it or not. I don't know if he has work related stuff to do since it's college football Saturday and all that stuff. So.
Well, either way, I should be able to come on the show. I just won't be able to host because I can probably come on with my phone. So. Okay. Chad says he'll do it with you.
There you go.
Yeah, we can bring in, we'll have some fun with the Hoosier Hysteria show. We can bring in some other people and we'll have some fun with it. All right. So let's hop into segment 2 here if you guys are ready.
Yep.
All right. Okay, I guess I should ask first. Did any of the comments specifically jump out to you guys so I can kick it right to you, or do you want me to point some out and then you react to them?
I will. I mean, for me, you can kind of do whatever, and I'll just react to stuff because I really haven't even had a chance to read through anything. So
Okay.
that's probably easiest for me.
I like to coexist. When they said something about he and Romeo coexisting,
Yeah.
I said, I don't think that'll be a problem ever. The word
Okay.
ever speaks to team chemistry.
Agreed. Okay. We'll open up with that one then. That will work. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. To watch replays of our show, to listen to our daily Banner Morning IU news updates, and to subscribe to our free IU basketball email newsletter, visit assemblycall.com. And you can also find us on YouTube. And by the way, the unedited YouTube broadcasts include all of the between segment banner that doesn't make it into the final cut of the radio show and podcast.
These are things we don't talk about on the air. Sorry, folks.
Learn more at assemblycall.com. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. And in my banner moment this week, I talked about Juwan Morgan's comments on the Andy Katz podcast, where he guaranteed that Indiana is going to the NCAA tournament this year. We all love that confidence. And, it was a short interview, but I thought Juwan really packed a lot of interesting comments into what he said. He's kind of like Archie Miller in that, he doesn't say a lot, but he chooses his words carefully. And so I just want to, bring up a couple of those comments and let's react to them. And I wanted to start with what he said about Romeo Langford, Coach, because, Andy Katz asked him for his impressions of Romeo Langford. And the first thing he said was, I believe all the hype. And, remember, these guys haven't played games together, but they've been, having workouts, playing 5-on-5, scrimmaging, doing that kind of thing. And, to hear him say, I believe all the hype, and then to go on and say, it's not just his scoring, but it's his ability to be effective on the court in every single way on both ends of the floor. I just thought, it was nice to hear that affirmation coming from Juwan and him not, shying away from, feeding right into the Romeo hype. But there was also another comment he had about Romeo, Coach, that you thought was really telling. Which one was that?
Yeah, and right after that, he goes on to how will they coexist, speaking of Romeo. And Juwan's response was, I don't think that'll be a problem ever. And I just think who is having the better game will be the focal point, and that's just fine with me. That's senior leadership. And I know they're words in an interview and they have to be lived out. But I think team chemistry is something that every coach is concerned with. Every coach tries to foster good team chemistry, but it's really up to the players on any team at any level to have that team chemistry, to take care of that locker room. If the locker room is taken care of, then the coach can focus on all the stuff that the coach really needs to do. But when he says it won't be a problem ever, you have a freshman coming in who's a 5-star NBA and Juwan's the returning top player. That's the potential for a little bit of a conflict. And it seems like Juwan really is concerned not only with making himself better, but he wants to win. And that's what I took from that. And from a coach's standpoint, that is so relaxing to have that kind of stuff taken care of. And again, it has to be lived out. It's easy to say in a preseason interview, but that's good to hear nonetheless.
Well, and I think it's funny when we talked about some of Archie's comments with John Rothstein about one of the things he said was guys are going to have to sacrifice more than they think they will, or something to that effect. And I think when you hear Juwan talk about that, and when your best players are the ones willing to stand up and say, yeah, I'm going to make that sacrifice, I think that's a great sign. So if he's willing to say that, then how does, guy 8, 9, 10 on the roster, how do you say, hey, I'm not going to do that, if the guy who's been there, before and really is the leader of the team is willing to step out and say that?
Yeah. And what's interesting is, he's the clear leader of this team. There's no question about it. And that's what you expect from a senior, but it's really a role that he had to assume last year, even though he wasn't the senior, and you had guys like Colin Hartman and Robert Johnson, for different reasons. Robert Johnson, it wasn't really in his nature from a personality standpoint. Colin Hartman, he just wasn't healthy enough to play. A lot of that leadership burden really fell on Juwan last year, and he really embraced it and stepped up. And Andy Katz asked him, what is one aspect of your game that improved the most from your sophomore to your junior year? And he said, I would say it was my mindset. I think I had the skills, but it was just actually accepting that role and doing something with it. And so, what I think really bodes well for Indiana this year, Andy, is that it's not like Juwan is now stepping into that leadership role for the first time. He really embraced it last year and took it on, not just from that kind of emotional vocal leadership, but also with the leadership of production that he had all of that pressure. And so now he'll obviously still be counted on for the same vocal leadership. I mean, he is the emotional center of this team right now, but to have so much more talent around him, like it almost sounds in his voice like there's a little bit of relief there, having a guy like Romeo and having, I think, more pieces that fit better together than he's had the last couple of years.
Well, I think it was a thing, I think, between the injuries and some of the other guys on the team. I think it was kind of easy for him to take a backseat a little bit to some of those guys and defer. And what quickly became apparent last year was that was no longer could be the case. And he really, stepped up to fill the void that was there from a leadership perspective and from a production standpoint as well. So, it's interesting the way that he phrases that in mindset. I think it's a little bit of like what he was being asked to do. And I think, maybe some of that is a new staff coming in that, viewed him differently or how they could use him differently, or maybe it was just really feeling healthy for one of the first times in his college career. But whatever the case, I think he, had a higher level of confidence and wasn't willing to, kind of step back and defer. And so if he credits that to mindset, then that's what we'll call it and go from there. But it was interesting, just the role that he was asked to play his first couple of years versus last year was a pretty huge leap. It wasn't a gradual build like we've seen with, Oladipo is one everybody talks about. There was, his freshman year, he was a role guy. Then he stepped up a little bit more. And then junior year was really the explosion. Juwan just, kind of bypassed that middle step there and got to where he did last year.
You're listening to Assembly Call Radio. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. We're talking about Juwan Morgan's comments on Andy Katz podcast from earlier this week. The other one that really jumped out to me, Coach, I want to talk about this one with you because you added some important perspective to this, and we were talking before the show started. Andy asked him, who are some players who will surprise some people this season? And he said, I'm going to say Justin, Evan, and Race, and Al will be the biggest surprises. So that's 4 guys that he named. And the one guy whose name wasn't in there was Devontae Green's. And of course, we talked last week or the week prior, when Archie Miller had his podcast appearance with John Rothstein, his glowing comments about Devontae Green and, really starting to feel more comfortable about his breakout and becoming more consistent. And, maybe this is just my silly mindset, but I hear that. And my first thing is, well, where's Devontae? What does it mean that he's not mentioning Devontae in there? Remind me to have some perspective and to not overreact to Devontae's omission from that list.
Well, as a coach, you're well aware in an interview that you want to make sure you mention all the players or as many players as possible and not leave anyone out because you don't want to create any problems. That's probably different for a player. The player interviews, you'll notice when they're the post game, there's a sports information director real close by to jump in if things get a little bit out of control. So I just think that was on the perspective is that he mentioned 4 players that probably weren't as big a role last year.
Yeah.
Devontae started and played a lot. Justin was up and down with his play. And from what everyone's saying is he's just exploding physically. He could shoot to 3. You heard that on with Jeremy Gray again. Evans knew. Race was last year redshirted, and Al was a guy off the bench. So the perspective is he's mentioning guys that most fans might see as being secondary roles or not know of, that they're going to surprise. And that's the way I take that to mean more than anything else. And he probably forgot a few people there too, as he's talking. But what's been interesting from a coach, how many people are talking about Fitzner?
I know.
And a lot of us with Kenny play defense at the Big Ten level, the Archie Miller way, but everyone's talking about how he's stretching the floor and can shoot. And I think that's a little bit of a telltale of the need to shoot the basketball and that it might be a lot better than what we think because he's getting a lot of love from a lot of different people.
A lot. And I mean, Andy, that's probably one of the more encouraging things in the offseason is just how, I mean, look, we haven't seen Evan miss a shot in any of the social media videos, so we can't confirm that he has actually missed a shot this offseason. I think he might have made everything that he's put up, but everybody seems really confident about his ability to have a positive impact this season.
Yeah, that definitely has been one of the constant drumbeats of anybody that you've heard talk about players on the team in the offseason, that his name has come up as one of the first guys mentioned. And, again, this is the season when, as you said, you're reading into comments like that. And I'm going to do the same thing with Fitzner. I mean, there's really no reason for a guy who's only going to be there for a year. There's not really that kind of like, I'm propping him up to, kind of help jumpstart his career. Like, this is his 1 year to do it. So he's either going to do it or he's not. And these guys don't, they don't have to, embrace him, buy into him or whatever for a guy who's going to be 1 year. If they don't want to, don't have to, don't whatever. And so I think it's, at some point when you hear it from enough guys, that's pretty telling. And I think the other comments that Juwan made about him later, where he said, surprised a lot of people just how hard he's working and how much he's changing his game so that he'll be able to fit in with the system we're running. So I thought that was an interesting part of that, because those are some of the concerns. I mean, obviously the shooting ability is what everybody highlighted from day one when his name first came up on the radar. But as you said, there were questions about, can he play defense this way? Where's his real fit from a lineup perspective? Can he rebound well enough? How does he hold up in the Big Ten physically and things like that? And so those are encouraging things, and feels like a where there's smoke, there's fire type thing. And pretty much everybody has been, pointing to him throughout the entirety of the offseason.
The other thing that jumped out real quick, he was asked in flirting with the NBA, what did you learn about yourself? And I thought it was interesting that the very first thing he said was, I learned that I have to eat better. I think Juwan's kind of been a guy known to hit up the McDonald's every now and then and maybe not always have the best diet. But, between that feedback coach that he got from the NBA and clearly what, Cliff Marshall is trying to instill in these guys, hopefully that's something that can help him be a little bit more durable, and have better stamina as we go through this season.
It's always good to sometimes get advice outside the program. It's like mom and dad's. You hear it, and then someone else tells you, and it makes sense. But again, I think that just shows to me the commitment as a senior. He's not punching the time card and just playing out his senior year. He's coming back with a purpose, and it's good.
Yep. All righty, coming up, those of you listening on the radio Friday night may be switching over to high school football, so be sure to catch the replay at assemblycall.com. For everyone else, we're coming right back with more IU basketball talk. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Nice job there, Coach.
I saw that pop up right at the last second.
All right. So there we go.
Better.
That was good stuff. Okay, so that's 11:56 and 12:12. Let me just put this in here real quick. All right.
For those of you in the chat room, the chat mob that's missing Ryan, here's his copy of the Big Lead Chargers stink. So filling in for Ryan is kind of really a big role. I got the San Diego hat last commercial break, and now the Big League.
We need you doing a preview for every episode. Let me just tweet out the link to the YouTube video real quick, and then we'll do segment 3. So we'll just kind of do this as long as it gives us content, and then we'll answer questions for segment 4. We're live talking IUBB. Join us. Okay. Sweet. David asks, is it going to be Knicks after Hoosier Hysteria? Good question. Good question. Just keep me posted on where everybody goes. Because I'll stay at the arena for a little while, and I think they usually do a press conference after the event.
I could get a table.
You should.
Somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Let me know where you'd like to go. And
if you get a table, people will come. All right. Andy, did you have a chance to look at the stuff for segment 3?
I saw what we had kind of emailed about. And so I saw the 3 things that you had in there. So I saw enough, I feel like.
Enough. Okay. Yeah, I think you got this. Okay. I don't know. I just saw, let's see. Brian says Trevor Hoffman is God. Even when Ryan's not here. He was saying that should be page 2, which is true. Okay. Let's do it. Segment 3. Here we go. Yeah, okay. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. If you're listening to the show, it's pretty clear that you are more than just a casual IU fan, which is why you need to be subscribed to our free IU basketball email newsletter. You will get our 6 Banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our detailed post-game analysis emails once the season begins.
There's a high-level operation going on out there.
This is why more than 6,000 of your fellow IU fans are already subscribed, and joining them is easy. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. Again, go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 and join our free IU Hoops email newsletter today.
Make no excuses.
Can we get some basketball, please?
All right, back to talking IU basketball. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Coach Tonsoni. And guys, I wanted to, as we go through this offseason, we like kind of diving into some of the stats and looking at the individual player stats, looking at the team stats. And so for one of the Banner Morning episodes earlier this week, I was starting to think about, team stats that really need to improve for Indiana to take that next step this year, to get better, to become an NCAA tournament team like Juwan Morgan talked about. And really try to think about what are the real high leverage ones that, maybe Indiana was really bad at last year. So there's, kind of a lot of room where they can get better, or that just, by improving in this area, it can really make a big impact. And so the first one that jumped out to me, I mean, you could pretty much name all of the shooting statistics, outside of the 2-point field goal percentage, but, improved 3-point shooting to me is really going to be important for this team coming up this year. And I think there are a lot of reasons to believe that Indiana can get better at that. I ran these down on that Banner moment, but just to review, only 26.1% of our points last year came from 3-point range. That was 302nd in the country. And not a lot of teams succeed, only getting that many points from threes. You got to be really athletic, have a lot of size, and Indiana's not there yet. And the thing is, we didn't take that many threes. We were 263rd in the country. And then of the ones we took, we didn't make very many. So we know that has to improve, and that if it does, it can make a big impact. So what are some reasons for improvement? Well, number one, you look at Robert Johnson being gone, and that kind of scares you because of how much our 3-point shooting was reliant on him last year. But I'm starting to believe that Evan Fitzner, even playing fewer minutes, could replace or maybe even improve upon what Rojo did. Now, he'd have to make more than 2 threes a game, but certainly I think we expect the efficiency can be better because Fitzner's a 40% shooter for his career. Romeo Langford and Robert Finney could pretty easily surpass what Josh Newkirk and Colin Hartman did last year. And, you look at Juwan, Devontae, Al, and Justin, they shot a combined 32% from 3-point range. I think it's fair to expect some improvement from them. Coach, as you look at it, what do you think are some other reasons why this team might get better from 3, or, maybe some reasons why you think that they won't? The other one that we've talked about on the show before is that, with the attention that Romeo is going to get, hopefully improved point guard play from guys like Devontae and Rob, hopefully we start getting better looks, which is one of the problems last year is we weren't very good at making the open ones, and we just didn't get that many open looks to begin with.
With the increased talent, you're going to be able to attack closeouts. And when you attack closeouts, that's going to create open shots, and open shots go in a lot more than contested shots. So we just have to have people who can hit at a very decent percentage. I've said over and over when you guys have asked, the ability to stretch the floor that some of our incoming players bring to Indiana is going to be so much fun to watch, because you got so many different aspects that need to be guarded. And when you do that, then the defense has to be set one way and shadow one way. And as the ball gets swung from side to side, again, skip to over a defense. There's a closeout. You drive. There needs to be help. You force help, and you're going to have wide open. So I think just the talent itself and the attention that the defenses are going to have to give is one thing. And I just think we're better shooters from Fitzner and Romeo. Finney can hit a little bit better than some of the people we had, which would offset Rojo's loss. And I think that's, again, maybe why we brought in a Fitzner as a post who can shoot to do some of that. But that, and then increased post play with some of the guys we have coming in. And if Duran can ever get back that inside out game, I think you'll see the numbers go up, and I think that they'll go up quite a bit more than maybe a lot of us expect.
Andy, I sense that you're steaming mad over there that I would dare suggest that Evan Fitzner could replace Robert Johnson's 3-point production.
I'm not going to say it didn't hurt a little bit, but it's fine. No, I mean, it's certainly no secret that the team didn't shoot the ball well, and that's a huge area that they need to improve in. I will say, if you want to look at it positively, the fact that they didn't take as many threes shows at least some level of self-awareness in coaching. So that's good. But yeah, I think being able to put 5 guys on the floor who can all shoot it is going to be important. I think Fitzner is a guy who provides that. Freddie McSwain had really worked his way into so many of the lineups that were used over the latter part of the season once the rotation shook out, but he certainly wasn't a guy who was going to step out and even really take even mid-range jump shots. And so I think from a spacing perspective, being able to, move guys around, find some mismatches to free up those open shots will be good. And I also think you've got some guys who are able to, who certainly have spent a lot of time in the offseason doing that. Justin Smith is a guy who people have talked about really has tried to work on his shot. Devontae was streaky last year, but we know that he can make them as well. I think Al is another guy who's done that. And I don't know, it's all speculation. I think we talked about this a lot last year, how much time is being spent on, shooting and those kinds of, drills for shooting and form and repetition and all those things versus, hey, we've got to install the defense the way that we wanted in the offense. And that was another comment that Juwan made of just, having a year under their belt, how much that was helping them in the offseason. So maybe it's just something that they're able to give more attention to this year than last. And I think to Coach's point, they're probably starting from a little bit higher floor just in terms of shooting ability and going from there. So it's hard. You're hard pressed to kind of go, a guy down the roster who's kind of maybe replacing his role and say, hey, there's no reason to believe can't be as good or better pretty much every one of those guys as you would go down that list.
Yeah, you look on the other side of the ball with the defending the 3-point line. That obviously needs to improve as well because Indiana was 267th in the country last year defending the 3. But I think, staying on that side of the ball, Andy, the one that you pointed out in our email thread this week was defensive rebounding. And I think we were both surprised to realize that Indiana was 210th in the country last year in defensive rebounding percentage. And what I was even more surprised by when I dug into it more and went into synergy is that Indiana was one of the worst teams in the country at basically defending second chance opportunities. Like when teams got offensive rebounds, they were really efficient at scoring against Indiana. So that's kind of a double whammy. If you're giving up a lot of defensive rebounds and then teams are turning those into second chance points, that's an area right there where if you can just clean up your defensive glass and get a little bit more aggressive, a little bit better at defending that. And look, part of that is because, you played with a lot of undersized guys down low last year who tried their best, but when you're counting on Robert Johnson to be one of your best defensive rebounders and Freddie McSwain, if you don't get the rebound, you're going to be in some trouble when you're going up against some big guys. So that is an area, cleaning up the defensive glass and doing a better job of defending guys once they get an offensive rebound that could also, help improve your defensive efficiency and maybe even shave off, 2-3 points per game for the opposition.
Yeah, I think that one, it did strike me as a surprise when we were, kind of looking through the stats because and maybe that's because the team tended to do pretty well from an offensive rebounding standpoint. And I think your inclination as you look at things like that is just to assume, well, if you're good on one end, you should be good on the other. Maybe that's fair. Maybe it's not. But I think that all goes back a lot to size. I mean, when you look down that roster last year, there was really, pretty much by the end of the season, really, I don't think anybody was playing that was over 6'7". I don't think Duran was really one of the only guys on the roster who was over 6'7", period. And so, when you're doing that, I think that speaks a lot to what you said of, once you give up the rebound, then good night, because you're not going to be able to, to offset that. And the team didn't block a ton of shots last year. That was one of the other, or they actually got a lot of their shots blocked last year. That was the other stat I sent you. And I think those both really tie back to just not having a lot of size and strength inside. And I think, with a lot of the recruits, Fitzner certainly has the size. Forrester is going to be really active. Race Thompson being in the program for a year gives you some additional size. So I think you've got a lot more options that you can go to when you really need rebounds and some of those kinds of things. So I think the size will help that. Certainly positioning is a factor, but just having more more options up front it should inherently help that.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. We're talking about some high leverage team stats that weren't very good for Indiana last year that if they improve will go a long way toward Indiana, becoming a contender in the Big Ten and getting back to the NCAA tournament. And coach, the other one jumped right out to you when we started this discussion via email this week was turnovers and assist to turnover ratio. And it's kind of interesting how this one dovetails with the first stat, which was 3-point shooting. Why are you confident that this team can get better at getting more assists and also reducing turnovers this year?
Well, I think we're just going to have better overall point guard play. And I think a lot of that rests with Green. Green needs to be consistent. There were times when he looked like the point guard that Indiana needed. And then there were times where he was not very good and really couldn't see the floor. If he levels that out, I think Indiana will be better. At 18 last year, the turnover ratio or percentage was 18.2 per game. That was right at about the NCAA average, good for 164th in the country.
That was 18.2%. So they turned it over on 18.2% of possessions. Yeah.
My bad on that. And when you look at guards need to have a 2-to-1 ratio if you're a lead guard or a point guard. That's a college goal. Some may even say 3-to-1, and all of our guards were under 2. Green last year was 1.3. Durham was 1.6. Rojo 1.1, and Newkirk 1.5. And so I think with Finney coming in, going to push Green for playing time. That's going to elevate his play. I think you have some ability with Romeo, who is a talented person who's going to be doing a lot of scoring, but as people come and double team, I think he's going to be able to get some assists and we score more. And I'm a defensive guy, but you got to put the ball in the basket, and taking care of the basketball also helps your defense because you're not giving up points off of turnovers. So you also lose an opportunity when you turn the ball over to score points, and you give the defense an opportunity to have good transition offense the other way. So we can't be average if we're going to be a top 25 team, a top 4 seed team in the NCAA where we all hope to be maybe this year. So that has to improve significantly, and I think it will.
I'm interesting with Romeo. I mean, he's such an unselfish player. We know he's going to get his points, but he'll have so much attention on him. And he's so skilled, has such good vision. He'll get a lot of assists. What'll be interesting is what his turnover numbers are. Because, you start to read a lot of scouting reports about him. And one of the weaknesses that comes up is sometimes he gets a little loose with his handle. He tries to split double teams and ends up losing the ball that way. So I would not be surprised if he struggles some with turnovers early as a guy who has just always been so used to getting to any spot he wants to go to on the court. He'll still be able to do that a lot in college, but those gaps are going to close a little bit faster. And so I kind of predict that that'll be one of the early storylines is probably Romeo turning it over a little bit too much and how they can, kind of get that, kind of under control as the season goes along. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue, but maybe just something to look out for as we focus so much on Romeo's strengths. He does have things he's going to have to get better at, and that will kind of be highlighted early in the season as weaknesses that he still has. Andy, as you look at, the assists, the turnovers, and the guys that we project to be handling the ball, do you think that this is something that can be a strength for Indiana, or is this something that, after so many, now, a few seasons post Yogi, where we're just trying to keep our head above water, is just kind of getting our head above water going to be good enough for this team?
Yeah, it's funny to think of it that way because, last year just felt like at least you're not hurting yourself. It wasn't necessarily good. And that's kind of
Al Durham was a revelation because he just wasn't throwing terrible passes to the defense.
Yeah, I think it's funny to look and figure, they're right around the average from a turnover rate standpoint. And that felt like just, leaps and bounds ahead of where things were before. So, if you look at that, kind of the two parts of that equation, right? The turnovers got significantly better last year. I think that was a great step. I think that should continue to get better as guys are more comfortable in the system. But I think, the bottom part of that ratio made huge strides. I think where the strides will hopefully be this year is really on the top half of that in the assist portion. Some of that, just to bring this full circle to what you talked about before, was 3-point shooting. There was a lot of guys who would kick the ball out to somebody who couldn't then make a shot. So, there's two parts of the assist. One is making the pass, and one is actually finding somebody who can make a shot. So ideally, if we're right about the first part, then the assist should inherently go up, because I do think there's enough talent and some of the spacing and things like that we talked about. They should be able to do that. You knock down a few more shots, you get that assist number up a bit. So I do think that'll improve. I don't know whether it goes, moves the needle all the way into really being a strength, but I think it'll be, it was kind of an Achilles heel 2 years ago. Last year, it was you've moved yourself to the middle of the pack, and you're not hurting yourself. This year, hopefully it moves a little bit further, but I don't know that it probably swings all the way into an out and out strength, just because that point guard role is still, up for grabs, or at least up for debate, if anybody's going to really latch onto it and not let go.
And look, another obvious stat that has to improve is free throw shooting. We've talked about that so much. I kind of felt like that went without saying. Indiana was 331st in the country last year. That has to get better. And Juwan Morgan is going to go a long way toward determining that, because, he's going to take a lot of free throws for this team this year, and he's got to be better at free throws than he was last year. Did any other numbers stand out to you guys? I know, Andy, one that you mentioned was, Indiana's block percentage. We had our shots blocked a lot. Again, partly a function of just not having a whole lot of size. Any of these other team stats that you kind of look at as high leverage that, really can help swing the season one way or the other, if we can, see a vast improvement in them?
No, I mean, I really think these are the big ones to me. The rebounding one was a surprise. I think it was fairly easy to come up with the first couple around shooting and the assist turnover stuff. The rebounding, like we said, caught us by surprise a little bit, and I think that's just another way to get those defensive efficiency numbers up a little bit further. But I nothing else really jumped out to me. I don't know if Coach has any different thoughts than that, but the at least a couple of the ones were pretty obvious and kind of opened up some old wounds looking back through the stats, quite honestly.
I know. Coach, any final thoughts?
Just the shooting percentage. We mentioned that briefly, the 3-point, defending the 3-point shooting team. But, we've talked about three major changes or improvements that are out there for this Indiana team. And you're talking about a 17-15 record, 9-9 in the Big Ten with an influx of talent. Improving some of these things just marginally even puts you in a 20-win, 21-win, and that's then makes Juwan's statement about making the NCAA tournament prophetic. So I don't think we have to improve greatly to be in a position that we want to be a little bit higher in a top 25 team, top 20 team all year. They have to get a lot better, and there's probably a few more we could ID, and we will as the season goes on, but these are the ones to watch.
Absolutely.
I felt like we had an amazing conversation on all levels.
Thank you, Coach. We always appreciate your kind words. All right, here, coming up in our final segment, we will answer more of your questions, including which coach from the Golden Triangle will have the most success, plus a player comp question that Ryan is really going to hate. That's next. Stick with us. All right. Well, that was 1807. That was a good, solid discussion there. All right. So we're at 42:15, 9:45. Got to be out of here at 9:06. No. Andy, help.
What it? You're doing so well. You're so confident, and then just like that, you just totally backed out of it.
Don't leave me hanging. It's 9:09. It's 9:09. Okay, so yeah, we only have a couple questions, but I think the two of them will last us, and if not, we'll get some chat mob questions. All right. Yeah. So if you guys have any questions, throw them in here for this segment. Okay. All right. You guys ready to hop into this? I think my daughter is up and not feeling well, so I'm going to have to run right after we're done here.
All right. That's fine. Yeah. I don't know that I have any good thoughts for Ryan as a past IU player. Maybe we can have some discussions about
I've got one.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll let you go with it and give your reasoning. And then if I come up with any other thoughts,
we'll get some thoughts from the chat mob on that one too.
All right.
Okay. Here we go. Let's do this. We have 9:09. So I'll let you guys know in the chat where we are. Here we go. You're listening to the Assembly Call. We are wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and a coach, Brian Tonsoni. This is the part of the show where we typically answer your questions. You can always send us a question on Twitter at Assembly Call, or you can leave us a voicemail throughout the week. The number is 317-762-6253. That's 317-ROB-MAKE in honor of all the shots that Rob Finnessy is going to make this year. So keep that number handy, and if you ever want to leave us a voicemail, it's a fun way to get your voice on the show and send us a question. So we got a couple of good ones. Let's get to these. We'll save the Ryan question for the end. But Joel asked, which coach residing in the Golden Triangle, Bloomington, Columbus, Louisville? First, is that actually called the Golden Triangle, or did he just make that up? Like, does anybody refer to Bloomington, Columbus, and Louisville as the Golden Triangle?
I had never heard of that, but that doesn't mean it's not true, but that was the first that I had heard of it.
Okay. And also, okay, well, I just want to make sure that that's not like an Urban Dictionary term also that he just tried to slide in there.
He just baited you into saying in the air. Yep. Well, it works. Even if it is, it's too late.
I just immediately got very terrified saying that out loud. Okay, so he wants to know which of the coaches there will have more success over the next several years. So obviously Archie Miller, Chris Holtmann, and Chris Mack. And we certainly know that Archie and Chris Holtmann are just going to continue to be compared to each other because they started at the same time, going after a lot of the same recruits. And you can, probably throw Chris Mack in there too because he's starting at Louisville just 1 year later. Andy, as you look at that, and you're obviously biased, but put your bracketology hat on, and same thing with you, Coach. Who do you think will have the most success over the next several years out of those three?
I mean, I am biased, but I'm going to say Archie. I think if you're thinking of the next few years, they seem to be set up most in the short term. Just I think this year of those three, I think IU would seem to have the kind of the best prospects for this season. I think the recruiting class this year will kind of lay the foundation so that IU is pretty steady in the coming years. Louisville has a hard road to climb. I mean, they really didn't bring in hardly any freshmen this year. So there's really not a whole lot that's going to carry over. I really like Mack as a coach from watching him here locally at Xavier, but they've also, he's got to work up and past a lot of teams in the ACC in the near term. So I think that becomes a little bit difficult for him. And Holtmann I really like, but I'd kind of put him in the middle. I think he's in a good situation where, at a school that, certainly doesn't prioritize basketball over other things. So there's not quite the pressure that maybe is on the other two. And I think he's certainly proven, if anybody had any doubts, I think last year proved what a good coach he can be. So I'd kind of rank him Miller, Holtmann, and Mack.
And if he ever has questionable text messages, he knows where to go to get those erased. So that's always good.
Well, no, he doesn't, because apparently, Urban doesn't know how to change the settings on his phone. He probably just forgot because of his memory loss issues, though. So,
yes, that's ridiculous. Coach, who do you pick out of those three?
I have been saying all along, Archie Miller. I think he's got a year under his belt and is ready to roll. They're all three excellent coaches who do things a little bit differently. I've also been a fan of Mack at Xavier. The ACC is going to be tough, especially when he's got to deal with all of the anti-Patino and the fallout from that. Might take him a little bit longer, and so that I think drops him probably to the bottom. It's going to be interesting to see what Holtmann can do. The Butler way was an interesting way to recruit, and then he goes to Ohio State, has a really good year because of some veterans having good years. Will that happen again this year? So I would say Archie, Mack, Holtmann, but they're all three really good.
Yeah, I agree, and it's going to be fun, watching recruiting battles between them. Obviously, Ohio State got us with DJ Carton, and I'm sure we'll see those three schools competing for a lot of the same players moving forward. So it'll be fun to watch. It's always better. I don't know. It's we don't root for Ohio State. We certainly don't root for Louisville. But and same thing with Purdue. But like, it's good when they're good, and when they have a good coach, and it's going to be a good team, and they're going to be good battles. It makes it a lot more fun. So I'm glad that we can have some of these discussions, and that it's a good debate, because that makes being a fan more entertaining. Okay, so this question comes from Ben. And he says, in honor of Ryan's absence, is only fitting that I ask a comparison question because we know Ryan's thoughts on player comps.
I hate player comps.
So if you had to compare Ryan to a past IU player, who would he be? Andy, does anybody jump out initially? Because to me, like when I saw this, there was one very, very clear answer right off the bat.
I'll let you go.
Well, think back to the early days of the show. And who would Ryan absolutely hate most to be compared to, but actually is a really good comparison?
Well, I'm sure if you're thinking it's Will Sheehy, that is kind of the first one that came to my head. So maybe that's where you were going, but
it has to be Will Sheehy because Will Sheehy just relished being an irritant. And we know that Ryan relishes being an irritant, but he was also a good player and a really valuable player and, had skills. And Ryan, certainly is that. We give him a hard time, but he's a very knowledgeable basketball mind, certainly can talk about a lot of different sports. So he brings that. And, Ryan has proven to be, Will was a very reliable guy, won 6th man of the year. I was about to say Ryan has proven himself very reliable, although his performances over the last couple of weeks have been a little shakier. But look, we're willing to, the weight of 7 years weighs heavily, and he's been very reliable over that time. So to me, Will Sheehy is the one that automatically stood out. And I'll just say Brian Evans, just because, that just to tweak Ryan. But having never seen Ryan play, it's tough to know exactly, what kind of player he was. But those were the two that immediately jumped out to me. Coach, did anybody jump out to you being a good player comp for Ryan?
I had Sheehy. I was going to go with Sheehy.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, what is it about us Italians that like to stir things up? So I can't respond because now I'm in deep thought about personal evaluation.
All right, so I just want to say we've got here in the chat mob, there are several guesses. The most common guess is Dan Dockich. So that's solid. There's some similarities there. I don't know if Ryan was quite that good defensively to be able to single-handedly shut down Michael Jordan. But let's see. Joel says Ted Kitchell. Now, hopefully Ryan gets that reference. That's a very good. That's actually a really good one because Ted Kitchell never lacked for confidence. That's for sure. And there's the story. I think he may have told it to Kent Sterling, or Kent Sterling told it about how Knight put him in the game and told him not to shoot, and he shot it anyway and made it, and just kind of ran down the bench smiling at Knight. I don't know if that's apocryphal or not, but stories like that are told about Ted Kitchell. But had that same kind of swagger, that same kind of confidence. And I believe Ryan was known as a pretty good shooter back in his day.
What about Hillman from California?
Joe Hillman, yeah,
there you go.
That would be another good one.
Guy could shoot a little bit from California.
Yeah, that would be a good one. Okay, final question here, real quick. Josh asked, and we got about a minute left for this one. Who's the surprise freshman that's going to shock us this year that no one is talking about? If it's a guy no one's talking about, it's probably got to be between Demezy and Jake Forrester. And I will say, my conversation with Jeremy Gray on Podcast on the Brink, he was effusive in his praise of Jake Forrester. Actually compared him to AJ Moye just in terms of, kind of being that effort guy, that attitude guy. I've always thought he'll somehow find a way to carve out a role because he has such great experience as a role player with the high school he played on. I think it'll be easier for him to find a role, although Demezy can obviously shoot threes really well, so that could get him on the court. Andy, who do you kind of think is the surprise freshman?
I would tend to go with Forster because of what you said. I'll throw a Race out there because I guess technically he falls in the freshman class. And he's definitely a guy who hasn't gotten a lot of conversation, maybe because he's kind of part of the class, but not because he was here, for a semester. So I think that semester is going to serve him well. I think he'll be able to step in. Plus he has, Juwan's blessing. So, feel good about that.
That's true. All righty. Well, that will do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you ever want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com and join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
And cut. All righty. Thank you for being here, guys. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I got to run pretty quick here and go help my wife out with my daughter, who's struggling to get back to sleep, I think. So I'll leave the window open if you guys all want to chat. But I'm gonna peace out real quick.
See you, man. Take care.
I'll see you guys. Andy, you're muted, by the way.
All right. Well, I was just saying I was going to go. It's been a long week, so.
All right.
Yeah. I will retire for the evening as well.
Yes. Okay. So. We'll see you guys all. Sorry, I got to run real quick, but we'll see you guys all next week. And thanks for all the support on Banner Mornings too. I appreciate that.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
See you guys. Thanks for hopping in, Coach.
Later.